Alrighty, welcome everyone to TJJ Mentor Pesach Prep part number 3. Pesach is in just a few days. It is Sunday evening now. Pesach is starting this Wednesday night. The last couple of weeks, we've been working our way through getting ourselves ready for Pesach by talking about what happens before Pesach and the first half of the Seder. Today, what we're going to do is we are going to finish up the Seder and post-Seder talk a little bit about on the tail end of Pesach of what's to come. Following this, I'm going to stop the recording and have a Q&A for about a half hour till 9 o'clock. For anyone who wants to polish up any last-minute things in terms of koshering their house, in terms of what they need to do specifically, if we need a recap on searching for the chametz or cleaning for the chametz, or if you're not sure if something is where it should be, we'll have an opportunity to ask those questions as well. I'm recording these. There she is, Evelyn. I am recording these sessions, and they will be on YouTube as part 1 and part 2 are on YouTube currently. So if you want to do your own review with those YouTube videos, you're more than welcome to. Without further ado, we left off last week. Where would we leave off last week? 1 second. My computer's being a bit caca. We left off last week with Motzi Matzah. Yes. Rachsa Motzi Matzah. So we are currently holding at the Seder, right? We are sitting there and we just washed for bread and we just dug into matzah for the very, very first time. Okay, that's where we left off. We're going to pick up with the next step in the Pesach Seder, which is going to be the maror. And to present the maror, we are going to invite Miss Carly Salk to the floor.
Hi, okay, so I'm Carly and I'm talking about the maror. So maror means something bitter, and for Passover, it refers to the bitter herbs in our Seder plate. So the bitter taste of the herbs reminds us of the bitterness of our slavery in Egypt. By eating the herbs, we feel bitterness ourselves and can more easily imagine ourselves as slaves. When we dip the maror into the haroset, we are associating the bitterness we feel with the hard labor of the Israelites that the Israelites experienced at the hands of the Egyptians. So every aspect of Passover is to teach us something as Jews. The entire Egypt experience is a template for Judaism and the first time we refer to as a nation. Eating maror during our Passover Seder is symbolizing that the only way to experience freedom is by contrast, through suffering. Suffering and bitterness is an integral part of being a Jew because of the intrinsic value suffering holds. We weren't put here in this world to just relax. We were put here to struggle and push through that struggle to achieve greatness. Maror is also letting us Jews know about our status in the world and how you're never supposed to be comfortable while you're trying to achieve your own redemption. The Jewish people are on a mission in this world. We weren't put here to just stay stagnant. Suffering is put into our lives to help us grow because growth is. Additionally, and most importantly, growth is the greatest pleasure a Jew can experience. So, can you hear me? Or is it? Yeah. So you can either avoid this idea and suffer even greater or embrace it. Becoming the best person you can be and having a close relationship with God is the greatest experience of all time. So by avoiding this idea, you are still going to experience suffering and pain, but gain nothing in return. So rather than trying to avoid this pain, embrace it and allow it to push you to become a better of yourself and gain a closer connection to God. The suffering will all end when we are redeemed in the final time. Until we as a nation get there, bitterness will never let us forget we got a job to do. So some of the halachos is, so we eat the maror after we've eaten the matzah, and we take a kazayit, which is like the size of an olive of the maror, and we dip it into the haroset, which is like a concoction of apples, nuts, wine, and other sweet ingredients. And then we make the blessing of all achilat maror. And we don't say the Berei Pri Hadama because we had the maror in mind when we made that blessing for the karpas. So once this blessing is made, we eat the maror straight away, and you should not speak in between making the blessing and eating the maror. And while we eat the maror, we don't lean, and it should be eaten in one mouthful, but slow enough so that you actually taste the bitterness, because that's a very important part of the experience. So the maror itself should be bitter, have sap, and be grayish in appearance. And it needs to be a vegetable that grows from the earth. And you can find like the horseradish in your local supermarket.
All right. Thank you, Carly. Unbelievable. So yes, that is one of the tougher parts of the Seder experience. But with that insight, absolutely, that life is not rainbows and butterflies. Thank you so much. When we're done eating the maror, we move on to the next step of the Seder, which is korech. So to teach us a little bit about korech and why we, after eating matzah and maror, are we now having that together, we're going to ask Miss Hannah Poole to the floor.
Hi. Okay. So from the moment you eat the matzah until you finish eating korech, you aren't supposed to talk. So korech is a sandwich of matzah and maror. The two steps in the seder before korech is motzi matzah and maror. So you may wonder, why do we have matzah and then maror and then the two together? And it's because in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, when we still had the Korban Pesach, they used the Korban Pesach, matzah and maror, put them together and then ate them all together. And the Korban Pesach was the lamb sacrifice that the Jews were commanded to offer before the night of Pesach, and the sacrifice will bring the Mashiach when he comes. After we had no more Beit HaMikdash, the question arose of what should we do if we have no more Korban Pesach, and what do we do with the matzah and maror? So basically, eating the matzah on Pesach remained a biblical mitzvah, so the Torah says that we must do it. And while the maror was only mentioned when being eaten in conjunction with the Korban Pesach, so it became a rabbinic mitzvah, which means the rabbis passed it down to us. So the matzah had been eaten first on its own because eating the maror with it would affect its taste. So if we eat the matzah with the maror, then the taste of the maror would also be affected. So eat that on its own too. So we have one, and then together. Once the two have been eating on their own, they're going to be like always together. Once you made the sandwich consisting of matzah and maror, you recite the following in Hebrew, but I'm saying it in English. In memory of the temple, according to Hillel, this is what Hillel would do when the temple existed. He would wrap the matzah and maror and eat them together in order to fulfill what is stated. You should eat it upon matzot and marorim. Some add charoset to make it not as hot. The matzah represents freedom and the maror represents bitterness, and they're eaten together. So the theme of the Seder goes from slavery to redemption. And this signifies that we fully appreciate the galut, which is the freedom that we have when we have been able to experience slavery. And then from there, we enjoy our meal with our families.
All right. Thank you so much, Hannah. Correct. Yes, the korech. And then we move on. After having that delicious sandwich with matzah and maror, we move on to probably everyone's favorite part of the Seder. But to get some insight into this part of the Seder and not lose sight of the bigger picture, I would like to ask Mr. Jason Firestein. Tell us about Shulchan Aruch.
Hi. So we have Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is the point of the meal where we have the food. So we just had an hour to 2 hour long Seder where we said all the blessings and every other part of the Seder. So now we're up to our favorite part, the food. So it's very hard to find a lot of things from the Shulchan Aruch, but I found a couple. So some people have a minchag, which is a custom, to eat a hard-boiled egg. The reason is because we want to mourn for the Beit HaMikdash because it's destroyed and we don't have one. So we eat a hard-boiled egg because in times of mourning, that's what people do, eat a hard-boiled egg. So this is the point where a bunch of the kids, they would eat their food and then they would start falling asleep. A lot of people would lose focus and they would get tired. Maybe they had too much mat. Maybe they had too much wine or other drinks. So this is the point where we have to stay focused. We shouldn't start talking about random stuff. We should start probably have divrei Torahs and and maybe ask the kids to say some divrei Torahs, or maybe like the adults talk about something special about their life, about Pesach. And we should make sure that we have enough kavanah and focus to finish the rest of the Seder right after the Shulchan Aruch. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Correct. It is very easy. Actually, for most people, when they have the meal, it's usually like that's the end of their Seder entirely. But it's important to not lose sight of the bigger picture and stay focused on the matter at hand with all that yummy food. And right after the meal, a festive meal, obviously, it is time for dessert. So if you remember way back 2 weeks ago, we talked about that we put away some of the afikomen for later. So this afikomen serves as a dessert, and to tell us more about that, I'd like to call upon Miss Maya Shamash.
Hi. Okay, so the afikomen is obviously one of the more fun parts that a lot of the kids like to enjoy. So when we split that middle matzah during the Seder, the larger half is wrapped in. So that's our afikomen, that's our dessert. So it's what we're eating afterwards. So a lot of tradition that people have is to have the children try and find it or have them try to feel it, however it works. But a big point of that is to also keep them awake. Like Jason said, like a lot of people are falling asleep, they're losing interest. So this is a big part to make sure the kids are still paying attention and still learning. So it is custom for the afikomen to be placed under the pillow of the head of the table. And so from there, the kids will either snatch it or they'll find it during, like later during the meal, like depending on your household tradition, however you do it. But the afikomen should be the last thing to be eaten from the Seder. So you shouldn't really be eating anything else after that. That's it. That's the dessert. So we hide the afikomen not just to keep the kids awake, but you also like hide it away and you keep it separate, so that way you make sure it doesn't get mixed up with any of the other matzah. And we wrap the afikomen to show how our ancestors in Egypt wrapped their unleavened bread when they were rushing to escape Egypt. And the idea behind, obviously, the children, you have to make sure they're awake, and you have to make sure also that they're asking questions, because obviously no other night, it's Passover is very different from any other night. And when we ask like Manisana, like the questions, we ask like, it's why is this night different? So we hide the afikomen and we do this tradition that's different. So we also help the kids to ask more questions as well. And so the afikomen being eaten as a dessert it really represents our liberation from Egypt. It's sweet, like dessert is sweet, even though the matzah itself is just matzah, but the concept of dessert is that it's very sweet and just like freedom. So we also had to wait through the Seder, and we had to tell the whole story before we could get to dessert. Before we could get to the afikomen, we had to wait and we had to hear the story, and we had to listen to the struggles and everything that the Jewish people have been through. So just like we had to wait for that, we also have to wait for our final redemption from Mashiach. So it's also teaching us lessons for today. We're waiting for Mashiach to come. That's like our dessert. That's our afikomen. Thank you.
Wow. What an awesome idea. Absolutely. We are absolutely waiting for it. And when it comes, it's going to be so sweet. So many people, again, they check out of the Seder at this point, and it's so important that people don't forget. It's like, just because you ate doesn't mean that the Seder is over. There's actually a lot of power and beauty at this tail end of the Seder. So carrying on, right after dessert, what do? Right? Just like at the end of all meals, we bench. So the next step in the Seder is called Berach, and to tell us a little bit about it and its uniqueness this time around, I'm going to call upon Mr. Avi Ozeri.
All right, what's up, guys? So just like the basics is we say it always after we eat bread, and it's supposed to happen in the same place that you ate the bread. So the bracha itself is actually split into a few different ones. The first one, it focuses on the food, and like you think for the food, and the second is on the land. The third is on Israel, and specifically in Jerusalem, and then the fourth is just like in general. So it's obviously one of the positive commandments we have, but the real question everyone really has is, why is it so long? We know the bracha before food is so much shorter than benching. So we ask ourselves why. And if you put it into perspective a little bit, we look back to like our ancestors and how they made their foods. It really is not that long if you think about it. For us, we have like the convenience of making food in like minutes or even hours, but they have to plan a day around it. So if you think about how long the bracha really is, it's really not long. But another important point of the bracha is that you're not just thinking just for the food. As I said, there's like 3 other components part of it that has to do other than the food. So we say it so often, or we're supposed to, that it loses its beauty a lot. But really, you're thinking for your parents, thinking for Israel, and at the end of the day, you're thinking for the food as well. So it's just like a small part of it. How to do it on Passover specifically, before you do anything, you have the 3rd cup of wine, so you fill that up. you say the bracha, and then you bench completely as you would usually, and then you say the bracha on the wine that you would say usually. You drink the wine, and then you say the bracha after the wine that you would say. And yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you, Avi. That's right. That's if we're counting here, we just downed 3 cups. We just finished the last one. The third one, we got 1 cup remaining after we bench. He has to add in Yalav for Pesach there. And then right before we get to the next stage in the Pesach Seder, there is a really incredible custom that we have that is really, really fun for the kids. And to tell us a little bit about it, I'm going to ask Miss, where is she? Tamar Van. There she is. Take it away.
So when we open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi and we say Shvil Chamachsa in Haggadah, we're saying to Hashem, pour your wrath upon the nations that did not know you and upon the kingdoms that did not call upon your name. So we're straight up asking of Hashem to torture and kill off everyone who doesn't believe in him and won't follow his ways. This sounds quite extreme, but at the end of the day, we need to realize how these people have affected the rest of the world and what that effect has had on us Jews. When Moshe went to ask Paro to let Bnei Israel go serve God, Paro literally asked, "Who is this Lord that I should heed him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, nor will I let Israel go." It's no secret that Paro was severely punished for this. He denied God and he denied Emes, and for that he and his people suffered tremendously, until finally it led to the redemption of Bnei Israel. Today we're surrounded by influences of people who deny God, and because of it, we're not as great as we could be. We're drowning in filth coming from the rest of the world that's preventing us from reaching our full potential. It's become so severe that everywhere you turn, there's some form of idolatry. It's sad to say, but this influence has really taken a toll on the Jews. There are Jews out there that have turned so far away from God that many of them don't even say Shvil Chachmasla in their Seder because they don't think it's politically correct. It truthfully isn't their fault. They don't know any better. They were subject to these ungodly influences, and because of it, they suffered a spiritual death. When we, the Jews, are being influenced by the ungodly behavior of the rest of the world, that's where we draw the line. We have to speak up and ask Hashem to get rid of it, destroy it, whatever it takes. We have to ask him to unleash his wrath on them, because we can't survive like this. How can we be the light onto the nations if their darkness is putting out our light? We all have so many influences trying to restrict us from following the ways of Hashem and having Emes in our lives. So when we open the door for Eliyahu Hanavi this Wednesday night, let's ask Hashem to protect us from these influences and save us from them just like he did when he took us out of Egypt.
Wow. Oh my God. Fire when you hear it and fire when you see it. That's right. And just like, back in the day, it wasn't enough for God to take out the Jews from Egypt, but, the destruction of the Egyptians who said, "Who is this God that you talk of?" They paid the price for it. And we can't forget today that the enemies of Israel will also go down. If you really want to have fun, you go sneak out the back door. And when they open the door, you come out and surprise people. It's just a custom. Okay, so after Shvo Chamascha, which is a very powerful prayer, and we fill up that last and fourth and final cup, we go to the second to last step in the Seder. And to talk about Hallel, I'd like to call upon again Mr. Avi Ozeri.
All right, so the word itself actually means like praising, an act of praising. We hear a lot about it throughout the year, and it's a combination of chapters actually. And as it's combined into a song. And on the first night of Passover specifically, it's split in half. We say the first in the beginning before we eat the matzah, and the second in the end. So the question is, again, why do we split it up like that? And we split up the first half in the beginning because that's the part where we speak about the past, where we speak about the Red Sea and being freed from Egypt. And the second half is speaking about the miracles we're going to see in the future, mostly about Moshiach. So we assume that in the middle, which is like the meal, we're speaking about the present, and we should stay in the present for that. And it's just a really special part of the meal because it's a song as opposed to a bracha. And in general, a song is much, much more like meaningful than a bracha. We see it all the time, and like in Shabbatons and whatever, it's much more important. So I think if we can all incorporate this into our Chag, we'll feel it much more, and it'll be a lot more meaningful to us.
All right, thank you, Avi. Yes, and 4 cups of wine definitely helps with that, I'm sure. Okay, so after Hallel, after singing the songs of prayers, when we get there to the end of the Seder, and we're just throwing it out there, we get to the We get to the final step in the Seder, the very, very final step of the Seder, the illustrious Nirtza that we very, very rarely get to. And Nirtza, if you look into every single Haggadah, you'll find that there really isn't much there. Even if you were to Google and say, give me some insight into Nirtza, there really isn't much there. So to provide all that insight, our scholar and resident lion, I'd like to call upon Miss Anna Freeman to tell us a little bit about Nirtza.
So, Nirtza is the completion of the Seder when we reflect upon the night and we assert that we fulfilled all the mitzvot. We ask Hashem to reward us, to bring us close, and to redeem us in Zion. And then we say the infamous closing line of the Seder, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. But how can we say this? We're so comfortable in our own lives. Under normal circumstances, we can get on a plane and we can always be in Yerushalayim next year, but we never are. So why do we make this empty promise? Why do we close our Seder with a lie? Yerushalayim comes from two words, Yireh, he will see God, and Shalem, completion. It's the city of peace, the link between our bodies and souls, between heaven and earth, between the ideal and reality. But Yerushalayim also comes from Yeshua, inheritance, and the suffix Aim, which denotes more than one. We see here, there's more than one Jerusalem. We have more than one inheritance. It says in Tehillim, Yerushalayim built up, a city knit together. Rashi explains it as there being a lower earthly Yerushalayim, the city we know today, and a higher one of intimacy, peace, and completion. This is the city of Yireh and Shalem. This is the part of our inheritance we're missing, and this is the city we're asking for at the end of the Pesach Seder. There's a story in the Talmud where four famous rabbis travel to the Temple Mount, and they see the devastating sight of foxes running in the ruins of the Beit HaMikdash. Three of them start to sob, but the fourth, Rabbi Akiva, begins to laugh. When asked why, Rabbi Akiva said he saw Uriah's prophecy of destruction being fulfilled, which meant that Zechariah's prophecy of redemption and rebuilding would soon come true. For 2,000 years, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim was a flicker of hope that sustained the Jewish people in the midst of chaos and despair. We always pour that fifth cup for Eliyahu as a cup of hope, but we are never ready to drink it. But now, for the first time in 2 millenniums, we might be ready. We have the earth Yerushalayim. L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, it's not a matter of hope. Our inheritance isn't a matter of faith. Mashiach isn't a thing of wishful thinking. It's our reality. When I was trying to figure out what to say tonight, I was reading an article from the Washington Post, and it was explaining the concept of yearning for a better tomorrow. But it ended by saying, next year, God willing, back to normal. And I see the same thing everywhere, everyone, myself included. We can't wait to go back to our normal lives, but we're so wrong. When we're praying for this to be over, we can't be praying for the normal world. We can't be praying for our old lives, our lives without the temple. It's not enough, it's not normal. And we need to be praying for something so much bigger and so much better. We need to be praying for the real Yerushalayim, for Mashiach. And when quarantine started, everyone had such fire and passion because we thought Mashiach was coming. But we lost hope and we stopped fighting so quickly. Even though really nothing changed, Mashiach is still waiting. Our chance to bring him is still here. It's still on us. It's so hard to talk about this because it hurts to think that, yeah, we might be home for the Seder this year. But for the next 2 days, honestly, just screw it. Screw L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. Let's do it this year. L'shana hazot, let's fight for this year in Yerushalayim. Let's fight for Mashiach now. And if it's not here by Wednesday night, when you're closing up the Seder and you say L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, recognize what it means, that even though you're stuck at home, you're not really home. That the Jerusalem we know and we love, it's not really the real Yerushalayim. And that each and every one of us, we need to fight like hell to fix that and to merit our inheritance. So at your Seder, scream it out. Yell L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim. And no, we're closer than ever to this being true. But we're not there yet. And so for as long as it takes, keep fighting to make sure this isn't an empty promise, and fight hard. Do your part and remember, yeah, it could always be tomorrow in Yerushalayim. It really could be, but it's on us to make that happen.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Anna. You could definitely tell that Anna and Tamar have a chavrusa. Yes, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, we must absolutely mean it with vigor. Most people, if you're going to get to the end of the Seder, the final and 14th step, where you're holding, it's late into the morning, it's 1:30, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, it's 2:30 in the morning, you had 4 cups of wine, heart and soul, pour it out there. Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. Moving on. So that's the completion of the Seder, but there's a little bit more. After Chol Hamoed, we have a holiday called Shvi Shel Pesach. Shvi Shel Pesach is the day where the Jewish people crossed the splitting of the sea. It didn't happen on the first days, rather after we had left. Right, so why is this an independent holiday, and why is the splitting of the sea so much more than just a really cool miracle that happened? So I'd like to call upon Daniela Mercer to tell us a little bit more about the splitting of the sea and the holiday of Shvi Shel Pesach.
Hey guys, so I know most of you probably know the basic story of the splitting of the sea. You know, we were exiled from Egypt, like Pharaoh said, okay, you guys can go after we did the 10th plague. And we left and we ended up at the Red Sea and it split and we walked through it. But really, like, the story is so much more than that, and there's so much more to learn from it. There's so much. So one of the first things of the splitting of the sea was that when we were leaving Egypt, we didn't take the shortest route. So the shortest route that we could have taken was actually straight through the Philistines. And that would have gotten us straight to Israel really quickly. So instead we headed towards Saudi Arabia, and we turned around and positioned ourselves in between the sea and the Egyptians. Why did we do that? It doesn't make sense. So basically there's two reasons that we didn't take the faster route. One, we had to cleanse ourselves of all of the muck and the ickiness and the filth of Egypt and Pharaoh and being a part of that society. You know, when you put yourself in a certain environment, it tends to rub off on you, and you end up adopting pieces of that environment. And so in order to really shed all that was stuck on us from Egypt, we had to take the long route, and we had to let the desert reshape us into a people ready for the Torah and ready for Mount Sinai and ready for Hashem. And I think it's really interesting, actually, because it's similar to Corona now. You know, we're all stuck inside. We're all sort of separated from society and everything that's been going on for the past years, and all this sort of ickiness of it, you know, the social media and all the negative influences and everything that brings you down and keeps you from being a spiritual being. You know, we're shed from that, and we're able to really connect to our roots now with Corona. And then the second reason that we had to take the circuitous route through the desert before ending up at the Red Sea was because Hashem had it in his plan that we would end up at the Red Sea, and that the Egyptians would go through and they would be destroyed and we would be saved. So actually in the Mishnah, it's described that the Red Sea returned to its strength after we exited it. And the Hebrew word for that is le'etana. But in Hebrew, if you write it in the Hebrew letters, the rabbis also point out that word can be pronounced as litanao, which means to return to its stipulation. And so why is that change in vocabulary and that technical issue important? So it's really important because basically Hashem made an agreement with the sea on the third day of the creation that when the Jews arrived at it, it would split for us. And why is that? Why is that important that he made that agreement with the sea? The purpose of the creation of the universe was for Jews to receive the Torah. And so if there was anything created that would stand in our way, it shouldn't have existed in the first place. There's no point for it. So when Hashem created the Red Sea, he created it under the circumstances that it would split to us when we got there. And so it was all already planned out that when we arrived there, it would split and we would be let through. Another really interesting thing about the splitting of the Red Sea is actually Moses, it did not split before everyone entered. It split after we entered the Red Sea. So there was a man named Nachshon, and he was the prince of the tribe of Judah. And when we were given the commandment to enter the Red Sea, nobody wanted to go because they were scared. You know, it was scary to go in and to face the waters when you were uncertain what would happen. And so he jumped into the Red Sea before it had split. And he was up to his nose in water, and he was drowning. And Hashem said to Moses, "What are you doing? He's drowning. You know, you need to split it." And that's when Moses lifted his staff and split the sea. And so what we can learn from that is that sometimes it takes a leap of faith, you know? You could be nose deep in water and feeling like you're drowning. And that's when Hashem comes to you. That's when the miracle happens. And so it's really important to keep your faith and to, you know, keep working and just trust in Hashem. And you know, at that moment that the sea split, it was an open miracle. It was said that the maidservants saw what Isaiah and Ezekiel did not. Isaiah and Ezekiel, they were huge prophets. They had a direct line of communication with Hashem. And it was said that when the Red Sea split, every single person had a more intense connection and a more clear vision of Hashem than they did. Another thing that we can learn from the parting of the sea is from when it actually split. So when it actually split, we were in the seabed, and we had the seawall on either side of us. And so usually water hides things. You can't see deep under the water. You don't know what's going on under there. And so when it split, there's sort of you could see what was hidden. You could see what was under the sea. And that represents a realm of spirituality that's hidden to us normally. And on the splitting of the sea, on Shvi Shel Pesach, we have access to that hidden realm of spirituality, and we can really tap into it. And so when the Egyptians followed us into the sea, they were confused by a cloud of smoke and fire. And so that's why they weren't able to catch us, and that was from Hashem. And so when we exited the sea split, it destroyed them, and it actually spit their bones out at our feet, so that we knew that they were dead, and so that we didn't have to continue to worry. And when that happened, the Jews broke out into a song known as Shirat Hayam, or the Song of the Sea. And it was led by Moses. And so we sing that song on Shvi Shel Pesach. We sing that song on the day to sort of remember the joy that came with the splitting of the sea and our exodus from Egypt. And what's really interesting about that is that after they finished singing the song, there was another song led by the women, specifically Miriam. And the women all had tambourines, and they were playing music with the song. And so you have the question, they're leaving Egypt. They're like in such a rush. Who thinks to bring tambourines with you? Who thinks to bring musical instruments with you? And so the Rashi actually comments on that. And he says that the women had such foresight and had such trust in Hashem that he would bring us a miracle and aid us in our escape, that they thought ahead and they thought to bring musical instruments so that they can celebrate when the miracle happened. And so I really hope that all of us can keep this in mind and really have that faith in Hashem, that he has it planned out and he knows what is best for us, and we are heading down the right path, and to have that foresight to bring something to celebrate with us, and to have that level of trust in him that they did.
Thank you, Daniela. Wow, quite the educator you are. I'll do you one better. They say that Mashiach is going to come in the schus of the women. That insight's going to go a long way. So this year, Shvi Shel Pesach will fall out next week on Tuesday night, I believe. Even though it's a part of the Pesach holiday specifically, it gets its own little shout out. It's referred to its own little holiday in and of itself. And to finish up the night, to close us out, there's one piece of Pesach that we did not discuss in length about enough, and that is when we open that door, as Tamar talked about, Shvo Chamascha, to invite Eliyahu Navi into our home, that there is a cup sitting on our table. It is the fifth cup that is filled up. And to tell us about that cup and about who he is, I'd like to ask Ms. El Brody to take it home.
Hi, guys. Hi. So who is Eliyahu Hanavi, and why does he get his own cup at the Seder? So as many of you guys know, Eliyahu Hanavi is a prophet. It is told that Eliyahu Hanavi frequently comes down to earth to help Jews or reveal secrets of the Torah. So Eliyahu Hanavi was one of the very few to be taken up to heaven without dying. He is known as the Angel of the Covenant. He is present at a baby boy's Brit Milah, and he visits us every year at the Pesach Seder. Before the war of Gog and Magog, it is said that as a prophet will arise to rectify Israel's conduct and prepare their hearts for redemption. So he is sending Eliyahu, the prophet, basically to announce Mashiach. So there are many supposed reasons behind the tradition of Eliyahu Hanavi having his own cup at the Seder, but the one that that sparked my attention the most is that the fifth cup was poured for Eliyahu Hanavi. As it said that when he comes to announce the presence of Mashiach, he is also to answer all unanswered halacha questions. So we don't drink the last cup in anticipation of the knowledge he will bring. So what is it, and now I'm going to ask you, what does the Brit Milah and Pesach have in common? So Avraham Avinu and Hashem made a contract with the Jewish people, which is represented by the Brit Milah, where Eliyahu Hanavi is present, which represents the past. So like the beginning of the Jewish people. Then Pesach comes down and we sit down, we eat, we sing, we dance, but most importantly, we say, hey, we're still here. After like all these years, we're still here. So this is representing the present. So Eliyahu Hanavi comes at our Seder, which is representing the present. So what is the missing piece? The future. We are yearning for Mashiach's arrival. We are praying and waiting for so long that Mashiach comes. So pour a cup and open your doors for Eliyahu Hanavi, and Bezrat Hashem, by next Pesach, we'll be with Mashiach.
Amen, amen, amen. Even more so this Pesach, God willing. We still got a couple of days over here. Yes, Eliyahu Hanavi, the last and final hurrah to bring. There's a common reoccurring theme, as you see here, is Mashiach, because we are not a link in the chain. We are a link in the end of the chain, and we are fighting for something. We're fighting for something, and until Eliyahu Hanavi comes to bring us that good news, we are going to continue to fight like hell, day and night. So that brings a wrap to the Pesach prep. We discussed all the way from the beginning. We talked about kashrus and chametz, preparing your house, bedikas chametz, beer chametz, zman cherusenu, halal by night, which is not said this year because we're davening alone. Seder, the Seder plate, Kadesh, the 4 cups, the 4 sayings, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, Manishtana, Vihisha Amda, 4 sons, 10 plagues, Rachza, Motzi Matzah, Moror, Korech, Shulchan Orech, Safun, Borech, Svocha Mascha, Halel, Nirtza, Splitting of the Sea, and Eliyahu Hanavi. I'm going to end the recording now and open it up for Q&A. If anyone has any questions on specifics, to anything that we discussed to this point. Keep in mind that these recordings are on YouTube. Additionally, we are putting together a mentor Haggadah, which we will email out before Pesach to all the families on that list. So I'm going to end the recording now. How do I do that?